All right, hello and welcome to this Unit 10 recording. We're going to be talking about user forms today. This video is going to be especially helpful for you to see what we're talking about. I've tried to make the instruction document clear, but really the best way to do this, to understand this, is to follow along with the video. So go ahead and fire up Excel. On our blank sheet, let's go into the Developer tab and come over to the Visual Basic Editor materials. And what we're going to do in the Project Explorer here, and you can resize this window, go ahead and make it a little bigger because we're going to use these properties for the first time. We haven't really used those before. We've used the Project Explorer part of this window before. This is where we would have said things like insert a module. But what we're going to do here is insert a user form. And when I insert this user form, it adds the folder for forms and an instance of a form, generic name user form 1. We're not going to change that at this point. And what the user form looks like is it looks like a window. It is a window. And if I were to run this program without doing anything, it's a user form, right? The name of it's user form 1, and I can move it around like a window and exit it out. Okay, so it's a blank window. All that's built in for us. You don't have to do any hard coding to create a window that pops up inside of Excel running some VBA code. Just getting that window to run used to be a really difficult task. Now, because of object-oriented programming, it's kind of easy because all windows are objects and all these windows have certain properties. So when an object is selected, like a window object, you can see the little handles all the way around the selected object. We can come over to the properties window and we can see the first property is the name property in parentheses. This is how you reference this object internally in VBA code, right? So the name is for VBA coding purposes. And then all these other properties are listed alphabetical. There's two tabs here, but the alphabetical tab should be selected. That's the one I always leave. And it's got some properties that are kind of option, like caption, and some properties that might not be that option obvious. So the caption is what the user sees for something. So this is my first user form. Okay? And notice that that's the title or the caption of this. And if I run the program, it actually says, whoops, if I have the user form selected and I run the user form, if I have the user form selected and I run the user form, I had to click on the user form object itself, sorry. It runs, it creates a window, and my window says this is my first user form. Right? Again, what I was doing wrong there, you have to click this actual object here in the editor space, and it'll run. I was clicked over here in the properties. So some other properties here. Back color does what you might expect a back color to do, right? So button face, for whatever reason, is the default back color. But if I change that to be, that color, that's the back color for the entire form. I'm going to go back to what it was, system button face. You can change the border styles. You can change, now some of these properties don't make sense. You can put a picture on the user form. I don't want to do that. I want to put, and you can put controls on the user form. So if you click on the user form, there's also this toolbox that pops up that lets us put controls, and each of these controls is themselves an object. They themselves have properties. And there's a label control. This would just be a place where you'd have some text, right? There's a text box control. This is where the user could enter text. There's combo box and list box and check boxes and radio buttons. And each one of those, we could spend a lot of time on each one of those. They do exactly the things you want them to be able to do. If you're building a big complex form, you want people to be able to check things, multiple checks, or radio buttons where only one can be selected at a time, and drop down list. It's really quite powerful. But for our purposes, we're going to come down here to this thing called the image. It kind of looks like a sun or a moon on a mountain. And I click on the image, and I can come over into my my form here, and it'll create this little image box. Now, whatever's selected in our properties window, that's what we see. So I see that this image I have just added has the square right now. It doesn't have any visible image in it, but it's going to. I come over to my properties window and it says image 1, right? And that's the generic name, and its type is an image. If I click here, my properties window says generic name text box 1, it's a text box. Label 1, it's a label. And if I do this drop down list in the properties, I can see that there are really 4 objects that what I'm currently doing knows about. The form itself, and then the 3 things I added. And it's smart enough that if I delete the label, click and delete the label, and click and delete the text box, it now knows there's only 2 objects left. Right? So it will be intuitive what we're doing here. This is kind of our space, and everything we do, the form itself and the controls we add are all objects, and objects have properties. So what are some of the properties of this image? If we go back to our document, oops. If we go back to our document here, so basically I just talked about the first page there, but there was so much I said that I know isn't in that reading. So I hope you're listening to this, and actually you are listening to it, so I'm glad. Here's some properties of the image control that I want to point out especially. The name property, again, when it's in parentheses, the name property is how we refer to this object in VBA code. It's not what the user sees, it's how we code it. And it's a good rule of thumb, it's not required, but a common practice to begin object names with a 3-letter abbreviation. IMG for an image, BTN for a button, right? Something like that. So if you're going to change it from the generic image 1, image 2, image 3, button 1, button 2, button 3, and the reason you would change it is because you're going to use it in code. If you're going to change it, be descriptive with the name. So IMG and then whatever it is. In this case, I'm going to put a picture of Mario, so I'm going to call it IMG Mario. The picture property, remember these are alphabetical, the picture property is where you browse to the file that has the picture you want to put in the image. And then the picture size, one of the properties there is an option of zoom, picture size mode zoom, and border style, do you want to have a border or not? So let's see what those things from the beginning of page 2 look like by going back here and doing these. I'm going to change the name of this to be IMG Mario because I'm going to reference this in code. I'm going to go down to the picture control. So the left column, there's a little line here. Left column is the name of the property, and then the right column is the value of it. And it's telling me right now there is no picture, but there's a ... on the right of this property. If I click that, I can browse somewhere on my computer to this Mario. Now you can get this Mario picture, this JPEG file from Blackboard. You could use your own JPEG, right? Or any image that would be supported by this. You can see that it supports bitmaps and GIFs and others. But I'm doing Mario, and now that Mario picture is in this image. The picture is actually bigger than the size of the box. That's where some of these other properties come into play. For example, the picture size mode. And we have some options on picture size mode. Let's come down to picture size mode. And I can see that there is clip, which is the default, zoom, and stretch and zoom. So if I say stretch, and if I say zoom, right, notice how our picture is changing there. It's not super easy to see the difference other than to say the wider I make it, you can see the difference more. The picture itself, the actual image, is taller than it is wide. And if I say zoom, it doesn't stretch. It fills it without stretching it. If I say stretch, it makes it fill both up and down. I'm not a big fan of stretching images myself. Now I could resize the control to match the image, right? And I'm kind of doing that. I'll leave it a little bit bigger, but it's fine. And then the so you can play with all these properties. You're not going to break anything just playing with it. but that kind of makes sense. And then the other property we were looking at is the border style. So let's go look at the border style property. They're alphabetical, remember. So border style, border style. Default is single, but you've got none. And let me show you the difference here. So I'm going to run this with the default single. So there it is. That's a single border, and you can kind of see the black bar around it. If I change this to be border style none, did I already change it? Okay, let me change it. Let me see what I did there. Border style. Let me see what single does. Huh. Oh, that's the... okay. So, I didn't mean to do this, but I did. What I just did on that video, I'm almost positive if we go back and look at it, I had the user form selected. And therefore, I was changing the border style of the user form. You can see now that the user form kind of has a border around it. And yes, I can see right here it is in the top of this window, I'm talking about the user form. I also can tell I'm talking about the user form because my controls, I have the user form selected, not the image selected. So when the user form selected, I want its border style to be none. And now getting back to Mario, his border style by default was a 1. And if I change it to a none also and I run it, then there's not a border around Mario. It's just Mario himself there. Okay. So it's we can do some interesting things here. I'm going to follow along with the reading here before I do anything else. So let's write some code. We're going to write some code for Mario, and the code we're going to write is mouse move. Okay, so I see what we're doing here. So going back to our user form, I want to get to the VBA code for this form. And I can do this by right-clicking here and saying View Code versus View the Object. This is the user form object itself. And I can view the code, and there I can write VBA code. And again, if I want to switch between those, I can just right-click and go to the object, right-click and go to the code. And in this coding window, when we're dealing with objects, it actually is designed to make programming even easier. So we built that window without any hardship. We put an object in there, an image on there. We made it look exactly the way we wanted it to, stretched and not stretched, and resized it and everything else. When it comes to writing code, they actually help us as well. Because in our code window, when we're dealing with a user form, at the top of the window, we have these two drop-down boxes. And this first drop-down box tells us VBA is helping us. Do you want to write code for one of these images, for one of these objects? In this case, the IMG Mario. If I hadn't changed the parentheses name, that would have been image 1. It's more descriptive to know image Mario, especially when you have more than one images and more than one user forms and other things. Image Mario. So I click Image Mario, and what it does is it creates for me a subroutine that it thinks I might use. If I don't use it, it's fine. If I do use it, it's already got the stub there for me. And these object-oriented programming routines are of the format, the name of the object, IMG Mario, underscore, the action on this object. So if you click this, something's going to happen. And just to show you, okay, so when Image Mario is clicked, hello. So let me go back to the user form again. I don't know if I can run it by clicking that. No, I need to actually pull up the object, and then I can run it. If I click the form, nothing happens. If I click Mario, I get a hello. Okay. And the reason is because in our code, the Mario image click has a response. We have code to how to respond to it. We don't have code for form click. If I wanted to, I could make a form click, right? And it could be something else. Okay. So and double clicking this pulls up the object. So that's kind of a shortcut also. So I double click this to get it back, click the form so it's highlighted, and run it. And clicking Mario says, hey, hello, right? I wish I could do it with an accent, a Mario hello. And clicking the form, you clicked the form. And the computer, of course, is not smart. It's just following directions. But the reason it's doing these steps should be clear that, or hopefully will be clear soon if it's not immediately, that when this object has this action or event, then everything in this subroutine occurs. And when this object has this event. So let's go back to Mario and let's look at all the events. So that's the first drop down, pick an object. Second drop down is all the things that we can write code stubs for. And one of them is mouse move. Okay, so I click the mouse move from the drop down and it creates now a third subroutine. If I create a subroutine I don't want, like the deactivate, right, it creates the stub for me, but since there's no code in the stub, it doesn't do anything, right? And if I want to delete it, I can delete it. So you're not going to, these subroutines will pop up, but don't worry about those. If there's one you want to respond to, like Mario, the mouse moving over the Mario image, then this code's going to occur. And the mouse move looks a little different. Click had no arguments, just left paren, right paren. Click, no arguments. Mouse move has a couple of arguments. It's got button, it's got shift, it's got X, and it's got Y. Okay. And that's telling us any buttons that were pressed, I believe, was a shift key pressed. But the X and the Y tell us the XY position where the mouse was clicked. So the best way to do is I'm going to go back to Excel. I can get to Excel through the tab at the bottom, through the controller, click the little Excel icon here. And I'm going to write, and I've got an example of this, in D and E, columns D and E, I'm going to say X and Y. And I'm going to change that to be centered text and yellow and use little borders around it. Because I'm going to echo in this XY space where that form, where the mouse is as I do it. So easier to show you than to explain it. Going back to the user form, double click on it, pull it up here. It's selected, now I can run it. Boom. And as I'm, whoops. Not doing what I thought I was going to do. Well, not doing what I thought it would do because I didn't write the code I thought I was going to write. The reason it didn't do anything when I moved the mouse is because here's the mouse move routine and there's no code there, right? So, of course it didn't do anything. What I meant to say was that I'm going to go into the spreadsheet at that specific cell, right, which was D1. And I'm going to give it the value of X, and E1, give it the value of Y. Okay. Now this X and this Y comes from inside this. There's a button, there's a shift, there's an X, and there's a Y, right? When you click the button, that's on the end of this private sub mouse move, right? The mouse move event has 4 arguments separated by commas, right? Button, comma, shift, comma, X, comma, Y. And I'm going to take the X and Y value from the mouse move event and display it on the spreadsheet in D1 and E1 so that, I should say D2 and E2. Let me go back there and change that. D2 and E2 so that we can kind of see what's happening. So try this again. It should do better this time. Okay. So as I move the mouse on Mario, notice that the values in D2 and E2 are changing. If I move the mouse on the form, nothing happening because I don't have a mouse move for the form. But on Mario, it changes. If you go to the upper left-hand corner of Mario, the values are, as you go up, X is getting, Y is getting smaller. As you go left, X is getting smaller. Right. So 0, 0, it's hard to get my cursor right on it, but 0, 0's right up here. Really hard to get to. There's a little bit of, if I had the border around it, it would actually be easier. So right up there, 0, 0. Okay, so I got it. And then if you go all the way down to the bottom here, we're getting something like 130 by 150. That just depends on whatever the size of Mario is. And speaking of which, if I look at the Mario, so I have Mario selected, and I look at the height, it's 150, and look at the width, it's 132, right? So those values are what we just saw when we were moving them. If I make him shorter, the height goes down 126, right, 78. I can type the value in here also. I could say it's 180, right? And I could say the width is 150. So if you change the property, it updates the image. If you change the image, it updates the property. These two always stay in sync. Okay. Yeah, so there's also a top and left property. The top property is how far it is from the top of the page, and the left property is how far it is from the left. So if I change left from 78 to 50, it's going to move, the left value is going to get smaller. It's going to get closer and closer, 50 to 20. The left value is going to get smaller. It's how far away it is from the left of its container, whatever its container is. And same thing with top. Top is 18. If I change that from 18 to 10, the distance from the top is going to decrease and it goes up a little bit. So that's the difference between top and left and height and width. Okay. So there's that. You've just written your first object-oriented program. It's got two objects, the user form and Mario. I talk a little bit here about in the reading about what I just got through describing, that objects, everything's an object when you start working with user forms. All the controls you add to them are objects, and objects are this really useful programming construct that allow you to think abstractly, right? An image, just all the things that are common about images, and you customize each image by changing the property values, which are the data related to that image, right? The height, width, border style, the properties of the form, the height, the width, the title, or the caption of the user form, text boxes, labels, all the controls have those features. And then actions are the things that it does to itself or to the things around it. These are the events that we saw, like a mouse move. You can respond to an event like a mouse move, and you can make the objects do things. It's I don't know if I'm saying I can't think of a great example right offhand for objects interacting, but they can interact as well. So what I want to show you here now on this this next page, here's some edit the Mario code to do the following, right? So image Mario, mouse down. Image Mario, mouse up. User form, click. User form, double click. Image Mario, mouse move. And for each of those routines, you're just writing a very small amount of code. You already have the image Mario mouse move. That's the code we've already written. So really, I just want you to add these 1, 2, 3, 4 more routines, and also add this variable G row count. The G stands for global, and it's just a reminder to us that the variable is being used across multiple subroutines. So it's not a variable just for one subroutine. Multiple subroutines are going to use it. So for example, mouse down is going to add 1 to the G row count. Mouse up is going to add 1 to the G row count. Okay. User form is going to add 1 to the G row count. Double click is going to add 1 to the G row count. Okay. And what we're doing every time we run this is we're going to the spreadsheet at cells down G row count over 1, so it'll be column A, just a message, mouse down, mouse up, click, double click. Okay, so let's just do that real briefly, and you can see what's going on here. So going back to the code, I want to do what were the events? So Mario mouse down, and notice that there's a bold for mouse move because we already have code for it. Mouse down. And I want to say that G row count equals G row count plus 1. And then cells sub G row count column A or over 1 is equal to just a message. It's just a string we'll put there, and I'm going to put this because that's the code that just happened. So this is just a way of saying, so I know that that was a Mario mouse down. Here at the top of the code, I always like to have option explicit and the variable g row count as an integer. Okay. So g row count will start off at 0. That's the default if you don't assign it anything else for an integer. So the very first thing, the very first thing I do is click the mouse down. It's going to change 0 to 1, right? And it'll say Mario image mouse down. That text will appear in the spreadsheet in down 1 over 1, cell A1. What about mouse up? So mouse up, same thing. G row count. I could copy paste, but I'm just going to type it real quick. +1 and cells sub G row count, comma, over 1, which we column A, is equal to, and there's a different message. In this case, I'm going to say mouse up was clicked, right? Or whatever we want to say occurred, and if that has 1 R, 2 R's. So just trying that, what I should get when I run this is if I do a mouse down, I see over here image Mario mouse down, mouse up occurred, right? And every time I click it, I get that. I'm going to get rid of the hello message because that's I'd rather it say so what about the order of these? So here's a subroutine for mouse click, here's a subroutine for mouse down, here's a subroutine for mouse move. In our code, it's mouse down, mouse up, user form click, right? The order is different. Is that a problem, you ask? And the answer is not at all. It is not a problem. When the Mario image gets a click event happens, it finds this subroutine wherever it is. If it's at the top, if it's in the middle, if it's at the bottom, doesn't matter. All that matters is there code for responding to a image click? And there's these 2 lines of code, right? These 2 lines of code happen when that image is clicked. And it'll find the stub and it'll execute the stub. The location of the stub doesn't matter, so don't feel like you have to move these around in any certain order. I think, what was the other code we had here? Whoops. User form click. Okay, so I'm changing the user form click code. User form click, and again, I'm going to change that similarly to say, and all I'm doing here, there's nothing special about this. I just want you to see how by echoing out the name of the routine that gets called, I'm just showing you how the sorry, I wanted to clear out that's from the previous run, so I'll clear that out from the previous run. I want to show you how this all works. So if I click the user form, it'll do whatever the user form click is. In this case, I'm just displaying a piece of text to the spreadsheet. But it could be a big complicated thing I do. If I click, the mouse move is still changing the XY positions in cells D2 and E2. Clicking Mario triggers really 3 events. Mouse down, mouse up, and then that's a click. So there might be a situation where you need to know the order of those events, but all 3 of those events occur. So if I want to respond to a mouse down, I can. If I want to respond to a click, I can. And if I want to respond to a mouse up, I can. So it's kind of neat. And if I click again, I get those. If I click this again, if I click it 5 times, I get 5 of those, and so forth. So let's look at the homework exercises. And I'm going to actually walk through these homework exercises with you because I tried to lay out some details, but I think it'll be easier, again, to watch this video as you do the activity. And don't limit yourself to just what we're doing in the activity. As you see something, you kind of think, hey, I think I know what is going on. Feel free to play around. That's absolutely the best way to learn something here. So you have two problems for this assignment. They're both user form based. One of them is called Click Game. Start from scratch to write a program that uses a user form and an image control to play a game. The goal of the game is to click the image 10 times as quickly as possible. Every time the image is clicked, the image changes its location and gets 10% smaller. So this sounds like a pretty fun game. The game should use the VBA timer command to get the time at the start of the game, and again at the end of the game to determine how long the game lasted. So here's a step-by-step for doing this. Use Google to find an image you want to click when playing the game. Some image formats, like animated or transparent, probably won't work with the VBA image control, but most images will. Start a new Excel file. I'll step you through this here in just a second. We're just reading through the assignment. Start a new Excel file. You'll be repeating much of what you did in the lesson above today. Create a user form. The image, add an image to the user form. So these are the properties that we set before. I'm just going to use the Mario image. You can use Mario, but it'd be more fun for you to go off and create an image of your choice for whatever it is that you're clicking in the game. People have done, you can do a cockroach. That'd be gross, but you're trying to click a cockroach and it's getting smaller and smaller. You can do a picture of, President Caboni here at WKU, a big red, getting smaller and smaller every time you click it, whatever you want. The zoom mode and the border style, those are the properties that we talked about already. It changes the look of the image control. And then create the following code. So use the drop downs to create the stub for mouse down. Do not type private sub image1 underscore mouse down. Do not type that. Use the drop down boxes to create the stubs. Okay. Now, when it creates the private stub image1 mouse down for you, you type in that code, but let it create the stub. And user form initialize, one line of code for there called start timer. The variable start timer gets the value timer. The form initialize, what that routine is it's the code that executes when the when the program first runs and it starts to build the user form for the very, very first time. So as soon as you click the little run button, it starts to build that form, and as part of that form building, it calls this initialize routine. The variables have an option explicit at the top. The variables are our G hit count variable again, the start time variable, which is a double, and seconds elapsed, which is a double. And the code that we're going to write inside the mouse down stub that it creates for you automatically is image1 height, image1 width is image1 width times 0.9. Image1, by the way, that's the generic name for the first image, second image, third image, image 2, image 3, image 4. We could have changed the name of this to IMG Mario or IMG Squirrel, White Squirrel, or whatever your image is. And if we did that, then this code would be IMG Mario.width or IMG White Squirrel. And the stub would reflect the name of the object. So we're going to say width equals width times 0.9, height equals height times 0.9, left equals worksheet function, random between 0 and the form's inside width minus the image's width. And that seems complicated, but what it's really saying is the form itself has a width, and inside width doesn't include the border. And the image has a width, so there's some amount of gap or space, and it's going to give you a random value in that space. Same thing with the height. So it's going to make the image move somewhere on the form, but still be completely visible. Hit count equals hit count plus 1. The caption is going to change to say number of hits, and then ampersand G hit count. So that string number of hits 1, number of hits 2 will be the caption property of the user form. And then there's an if statement. If G hit count is greater than or equal to 10, then, and it says then, and there's an end if down here. So everything between the if and the end if occurs only when G hit count is greater than 10, the image become visible as false, which means you can't see it anymore. It still exists, but it's not visible to the user. Second, the elapsed is assigned. The value between timer minus start time rounded to I'm not sure, 2 decimal places, I guess so. And game over, your time was whatever that second time we just calculated. And then unload, user form 1 is a command that will make the user form disappear. Okay. So let's try that. Let's do this real quick. We'll pull Excel back up. So I've got this file. I'm going to close this. I'm not going to save anything, because it's useful to just repeat the process to do the whole thing again from scratch. And well, I'll pull up Excel here. So we'll pull this up from scratch, starting from brand new, go into developer tab, form, create a user form, add an image to the user form. Okay. Now you can make the form whatever size you want. You can make the image whatever size you want. Change the properties of this image. I'm going to use, again, the Mario, but you can go off to the web and grab whatever you want. And I'm going to set this to be a picture size mode 3, which is a zoom mode. And actually I'm going to do the stretch, which I don't usually do, but I am going to do the stretch, and I'm just going to resize it so that it doesn't look like it's stretched. There we go. I'm going to leave the border on there. Don't know why, it just kind of makes it more explicit where the image is. And let's write the code. So the code for this user form is visible to us there in our document we were looking at. So option explicit. Okay. 3 variables, G hit count as integer, start time and seconds elapsed as double, okay, and then private sub image1 mouse down blah 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 blah. It's really important that you don't type that, but that you use the drop down boxes at the top to create the stub. So image1 click, that's not the one I want. Image1 oh, it was image1 click, I'm sorry. Image1 mouse down. It would actually work either way, but I'm going to go ahead and do mouse down. Okay, just because that's what it, oh, I'm sorry. One of the differences between click and mouse down, this is a good example. Click does not have any arguments, so I don't know what the X and Y value was for this if I wanted that. Mouse down has 4 arguments, items separated by a comma list, right? So a button variable, comma, shift variable, and the value of button, shift, X and Y depends on the where it is that you clicked and what button you used to click it. So I don't need this image1 click. I'm going to remove it. But I have the stub. It created the stub for me for image1 mouse down, and then I write that code that is in this page here. I'm going to go ahead and cheat ahead and pause this while I type that code. Actually, let me do this let me write the first line of code here. Image1 dot. Now, when I start typing, something interesting happens. When you type the name of the object, image1 dot, it gives you context sensitive help. This is actually called code complete. It's trying to help you finish your line of code. So image1 dot, it knows about all these properties of the image that you might want to reference in code, right? And it's even got, so the icon of a little hand pointing to the property window, or it's saying, are you changing this property, this property, this property? And it's also got these little green block being thrown through the air. So those are actions that you can reference. Okay. Set focus, Z order, and most of these you'll never use. But the nice thing is, if you think of something you'd like your program to do, the object probably already has it built in, right? And what we're doing is we're changing the width property. So as I start typing width, it shows up the code complete. And whatever is selected, I can press enter, and it'll enter it, or I can hit tab, either way, and it'll accept that for me. Equals image1.width plus 1. I'm sorry, times 0.9, right? So it's times 90%. It's going to shrink. The width is going to shrink. And image1 height is equal to image1 height times 0.9. Okay, and so on as you type all this code, which again, I'm going to pause now and do all that. Okay, I just typed this line, and I wanted to stop and talk about this line. The left position is how far the image is from the left of its container. In this case, the image is being contained on the form. So the left value is going to be a random value. So it's going to move to a random left position and a random top position. But how do we make sure that that random value is on the form? We use UserForm1 inside width and image1 width. So it's the width of the image subtracted from the available width, or the inside width of the user form. That gives us how much free space we can make our random value for. Okay, so the smallest value is 0. So the left value could be 0, which would be right up on the left of the user form, and the right value, the maximum value, would put us all the way to the right of the form. And we do the same thing with image1 top. We do that same kind of worksheet function, random between, using the user form's maximum height and the image's necessary height. Okay, so I typed in the rand between for the top. G-hit count equals G-hit count plus 1. We're counting how many times we've clicked or hit. That could be, I'm using hit to mean you clicked on the image. So every time you do a mouse down on the image, right, we're going to count that as a hit. We're going to update the caption on the user form based on this string here, number of hits, colon, space, and then a numeric value, whatever G-hit count is at that moment. And if it's greater than or equal to 10, the image becomes no longer visible to the user. We calculate the seconds elapsed based on the current timer, and then a value, whatever the timer was when we started. We haven't got that value yet. We're about to get it. Message box to the user, congratulations, and give them a time formatted to 2 decimal places. And unload user form 1 makes the user form disappear and go away. Okay. The other line of code we need is we need that user form, not user form click, but user form initialize. Okay. So it created this user form click event procedure. I can leave it there and leave it empty. I can get rid of it. Right? I don't need it. Doesn't care. But this user form initialize, that's the one I want. And what the code for that is to say start timer, that variable gets the value from the Visual Basic Timer global timer thing. Right? I just want to remember start timer is equal to timer. Okay. So if I've done this correctly, we'll see something fun when I run this. And if I haven't done it, we'll debug it, and that'll be good too. Okay, so the control is selected. I run it, and variable not defined. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. The advantage of having option explicit is you get those kinds of messages. You definitely want option explicit almost every time, everything you do. Start timer, I misspelled it. So it's called start timer. Now here's a question, and maybe this will make sense to you. I have start timer here. Do you want to proceed? Yes. I have start timer. It was highlighting this one, but I have start timer here too. So it really was a problem for both of these. Why did it highlight this reference to start timer and not this reference to start timer? Because I ran the program and it was initializing the user form before I'd never clicked the image yet, right? So it made sense that it was highlighted here and not up there. Okay. Try that again now that I have the names correct. Okay, so it's running right now, and when I click the image, it moved it and made it a little smaller. Moved it, made it a little smaller. Every time I'm clicking it, it's getting a little bit smaller. That's my 7th click, that's my 8th click, that's my 9th click, and then that was my 10th click. So it took me 17.41 seconds. I don't actually have the word seconds at the end of that, but that took me 17 seconds. If I wanted to change this, I could take that game over message, your time was, whatever that value is, and then add to the end of that space seconds if I want it to be even a better output message there, which isn't in your reading, I know, but if I try to do it as fast as I can. All right, so I was able to get this to 5.56 seconds. It's a little harder. The bigger the image is, the harder. The bigger the user form is, and the smaller the image starts, it gets even harder, right? So this one, because I have a bigger user form and I started with a slightly smaller image, it's going to take me even longer to get them, 6 seconds. All right. But it's really cool. I think it's pretty cool what we're doing there. And that's the first of your 2 homework assignments. The second of your 2 homework assignments, oh, I'm sorry. When it works, this is what the program is doing. So we didn't write much code, but this is what it's doing. A, each time the user clicks an image, the image should move to a new random location. B, each time the user clicks the image should get 10% smaller. C, each time the user clicks the image, the text in the top left of the user form changes to show the number of clicks the user has made. D, after 10 clicks, the image should disappear. E, after 10 clicks, the user should see a message telling them how long it took to make all 10 clicks. And F, after the user sees the message and clicks OK, the user form should disappear. So here's little code snippets of what you wrote. In cell A1, write the letter A through F to correspond to which of those A through F 7 steps we just talked about this line of code does. Image1.width equals image1.width times 0.09. Is that F? After the user sees the message and clicks OK, the user form should disappear. Is that E? After 10 clicks, the user should see a message telling him how long, right? So this will just help me know that you're not only writing this code, but kind of understanding what they're doing. All this functionality A through F is in the code you wrote. Which of those letters does that code block do? Which of those letters A through F does this line of code do? Write the letter A through F in cell A2 corresponding to this line of code. These 2 statements, what do? They do one of the things, the 7 things A through F. Write that letter A through F in cell A3 that corresponds to what these lines of code do, trigger of those A through F. Okay, and then save your work. The other thing for this assignment is the Excusorama. Create a user form with 4 buttons and 2 labels. The first label should read, why did I not submit my homework on time? And the second label should be blank when the program begins. Clicking each button should display an excuse in the second label, explaining why the student did not submit their homework. For example, the first button might display the message, I was stuck in traffic, and the second button might display the message, my dog ate my laptop. Each of the 4 buttons should have a single unique excuse. Then add 4 image controls with the 4 images that are appropriate for each excuse. When an excuse button is clicked, that excuse's image should be made visible and the others invisible. Okay. So below is what it might look like at some point. Why did I not submit my homework? 4 buttons, and if I click excuse 3, it might be because I was watching Rick and Morty, and an image might become visible that's relevant to the excuse you're giving. So in this document, I don't have a lot of explanation for it. And you could try it without watching the video, and then if you get stuck, come back and watch the video, or you can just follow along here. Okay, so I've got that user form. I need a different user form for the excuse, so I'm going to insert another user form. Okay. And this user form is my excuse. If I wanted to change the name of the user form, I could do it here, or I could just leave it UserForm 2 and remember what they are. This UserForm is going to have, I mentioned changing names. If you're going to change the name, do it right from the start. You don't want to change the name later. So if we're going to change the name, FRM excuses. Okay. Now, it still shows UserForm 2 as the label, right? The caption, or the caption is what the user sees. Okay. So the caption is what the user sees. The name is what we call it in code. So here in the VBA project window, notice that it's calling it FRM excuses because that's the name property. Okay. So it says we're supposed to have a label. So when you click on the control, the toolbox pops up and there's a label control here. Labels are good for writing messages to the user to help them be descriptive. And I'm going to make the label, not the name, but the caption of the label. The caption is what the user sees. What is your excuse for not doing your work? What did it say? Why did I not submit my homework on time? We'll use that wording. Okay. And there it is. Now if I want that font to be larger, I select the control, the label, and go under the font option, ... on the right, and I can make it 12-point font. Right? You can make it italics, you can do all those things, change the font type and all those deals. There's going to be another label. There's going to be 4 buttons. So the button control is down 2 over 1 is the command button. They call it a command button. And you can click the button in the control box and then just click on the form, and that'll be the upper left-hand corner where the button appears. And you can, if you want to resize them, you can. Sure, I'll go ahead and resize a little bit here. Right? And another button, and another button, and another button. Default button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4. That's the command. That's the generic names. Command button 1, command button 2. Okay. If I want to change these, the names, it's best to change them early. I'm going to not change them in this case. I'm going to leave them command button 1, command button 2, command button 3, command button 4. The height and width, you can spend a lot of time just kind of playing around with getting things to look the way you want them to look. As you get more experience with them, it'll become easier to do that kind of look and feel stuff. But the power here, what we're really doing that makes this interesting is not the look and feel, but the code behind it. Now I'm not going to change the name, because that can sometimes, if you don't change the name properly, it can mess up things. I'm going to leave them the generics, but I am going to change the captions. Right, so command button 1, I'm going to just call this excuse 1. Right, just like we had in this picture. Excuse 2, excuse 3, excuse 4. What the user sees, these are the captions, not the names. And then below that, I'm going to add another label. Right? That's going to be the text of my excuse, whatever the text of my excuse is. And I'm going to make the font size of this to be, we'll do 12 point for the one, I think we did. So I'll make that 12.2, 12 point as well. So this is object label 1, this is object label 2. Right? If we do our drop-down list, we see we've got command button 1, 2, 3, 4, label 1, label 2, and the form. So we've got all those 7 objects. If I select label 1 from this list, it selects it on the form. These are the properties for it. The label 2 caption, the default is the name. I'm going to leave it blank, and we can't see it here. I'm going to apply a border to it. Don't have to, but I'm going to apply a border just so we can kind of see what's going on. and then I'm going to add a series of, I'll do the images in a second. Let's just get the text part of this to work first. So if I click excuse 1, what do I want to have happen? I can go to the code window, or I can get to the code window by double clicking on the form. So if I double click on the excuse button, it actually takes me to the code window, and it created for me what it thinks I probably was going to use, command button 1 being clicked. Put option explicit at the top. And I do want command button 1 being clicked. If that happens, I want to change the text in the label 2. Right? I want to say that label 2 dot. And you want to make sure you see the little pop-ups there. That means you know you're referencing the object correctly. If I type label 2 dot and I don't get this pop-up here, then I know something's wrong. Label 2 dot caption. And my excuse is dog ate my homework. Okay. And now when I run this form, if I click excuse 1, the error message, a dog ate my homework, appears as the text, the caption of label 2. What happens when I click excuse 2? Nothing. Excuse 3? Nothing. Excuse 4? Nothing. Why? Because I haven't written any code for button 2 click, button 3 click, button 4 click. But if I come back here into the user form and say command 2 click, right, label 2.caption is equal to I overslept. And now when I run dog ate my homework, overslept, dog ate my homework, overslept, excuse 3, excuse 4, they're not doing anything because I haven't written those routines yet. I was watching Rick and Morty. It was spelled with a Y. I don't know why. I was thinking it was spelled the other way. Rick and Morty. Okay. And likewise, command button 4 click. It's really important that I don't type the stub. Let it build the stub for you, either from clicking on the object in the user form or from the drop-down list. Okay. Under 4, command button 4 click. Okay. Label 2. And when I run Rick and Morty, overslept, dog ate my homework, another excuse. Right? So we're close to being done here, actually. The thing that is pretty cool, it doesn't take hardly any coding, and it's a neat thing we can do, is we can add images. Okay? And I'm going to make that image kind of fit in that space. That's image 1. And I'm going to pull an image appropriate for dog ate my homework by going off to the web, finding a dog ate my homework, and then using this here. So let me go grab it. So I just downloaded 4 pictures that'll kind of match up with my excuses here. And I'm going to, I only have 1 image on here so far, image 1. I'm going to set the picture property to be, this first excuse is dog ate my homework. And again, it's not showing up on the page, so the stretch mode can be helpful. Stretch might cause it to, if it's very long, it might make it look weird. If I do the third option, I might have some gray, but the image will be perfect for the size. Now, let me add more images here, and I'm actually going to just stack these images up on top of each other. Right? So I'm putting it in the same basic place as the last one was. Okay. And you can only see the one that's on top. So image 2 here, I'm going to change the picture property of image 2 to match with overslept. And I'm going to change the zoom on it. Okay. And put another picture, picture 3. I can resize these manually to make them all basically the same size and location. And picture 4. Okay. How do we make them visible, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them all initially invisible when the program first runs. And I do that by setting their properties right now to be visible false. Right? So there's so for each one of these, select one of them, and visible is false. Okay. That was for image 4. Do the same thing for image 3, image 2, and image 1. You do it in whatever you want to. And image 1. So I've set all 4 of my images to be false. That's their initial values. So when I run the program, none of them are visible. They're all initially visible false. If they'd all been left with their default visible true, they would all be visible, but you would only see the one that was on top. Yeah. So now as I click my excuses, I'm going to do one more thing in my button clicks, that based on what button I click, I'm going to make that image appear in the top, or make that image visible. So the code for excuse 1, I can double click it to get to it, or I can go to the code editor, make sure I'm using button 1 click. Here's my excuse for button 1. All right, homework, overslept, Rick and Morty, another excuse. I'm changing label 2 each time. Right? There's only one place for the output, it's label 2. But I'm making image 1 visible is equal to true. And if I click button 2, I'm making image 2 visible equal to true. And then image 3 visible true. And image 4 visible true. Okay. And now when I run the excuse form, I got to have the excuse form visible. When the excuse form is selected and I run the excuse form, if I say number 3, I was watching Rick and Morty. Now something interesting happens. If I say excuse 4, that pops up. But if I say excuse 1 and excuse 2, they don't seem to pop up. Right now, all 4 excuses are visible, but you can only see the one that's on top. So if I wanted to be able to switch through all these excuses, I'd have to write just a little more code here. I'd have to say something like, I could do it this way. Okay, so I'm saying that all 4, I only want image 1 to be true, and the others are invisible. So none of these specific lines of code I'm writing are really complex. Right? It's just a matter of, if I could spell false, it would help too. By doing it this way, it doesn't matter which excuse. If I click 3, the other 3 images are going to be gone. So it doesn't matter how they're stacked or how they're ordered. Only image 3 will be visible. And if I click button 4, the other 3 will not be visible. So it doesn't matter what order they're in. Only image 4 will be visible. So now our excuse-orama is working even better. Excuse 2, overslept. Excuse 1, homework. Excuse 2, overslept. Homework, Rick and Morty, homework, Rick and Morty, homework. Another excuse, Rick and Morty, another excuse, Rick and Morty, overslept, homework. Okay. Yeah, pretty impressive. that we don't have to write a lot of code to be able to do this, but we do have to understand programming logic. We do have to understand what these basic commands are, and we're not doing complicated logic here. We're not doing complicated if statements or loops, but I think you can imagine that we can combine user forms with our other structures and do even more. But for today, I just want you to write these two programs. I want you to write the Excusorama. I want you to write the click game, right? And save that, upload that to me, and you'll be good. If you have any questions, of course, send me an email and get in touch with me. Let me know what's going on. Have a good day.